Hello and welcome to the Johnversations Podcast. As always, I am your host, John Connor, and this is episode number 43. My guest today is a Louisiana native and an adult nurse practitioner certified by the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. But you may know her from season 11 of the hit show, Married at First Sight. Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, please welcome Miss Olivia Cornu. Olivia, thank you so much for being here. Crowd is going wild. No, it's absolutely my pleasure. I got some new toys for Christmas, so you're my first guest where I get to use little sound effects.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I definitely want to talk about the show. People know you from Married at First Sight, and I think people were very invested in your journey and like the aspects of your relationship and the challenges and things like that. But the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you about first is you're an everyday superhero, whether or not, we've had my friend Morgan on the show, who's a nurse practitioner and kind of right in the middle of when COVID was happening and things like, I mean, it's still happening, but like it was around March. So when it was very new.
Yeah.
And she was a little reluctant to take that title, but I'm a very firm believer that you guys are superheroes with what you do every single day. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about, how you got into nursing and what drew you to that and just what it's been like for you. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about, since the show is wrapped up and things like that, like how have you been doing with COVID and working and everything like that?
Yeah, so I like to think of myself more as like a second line hero. And I say that as someone who has taken care of COVID patients, but I'm not really full-fledged into COVID. My specialty is neurology and neurosurgery, and so we take care of more of those type of patients. And I've been thankful enough that my institution didn't make me go back to the bedside and work in the ICUs. And so I think that there's people out there like the EMS and the firefighters and the respiratory therapists and the nurses that don't get the attention that they should. And so I do take care of COVID patients, but it's not full force. But since filming the show, really, we were a hot spot in the beginning about March with COVID, and it was very scary and a very weird time in the city, especially. But since then, I feel like our mayor has done a really good job, and our governor has done a really great job at keeping us shut down in Louisiana and just really keeping us safe, especially in New Orleans. And so it's just all about social distancing, wearing your masks and washing your hands. But, I've been thankful and lucky enough that I haven't had COVID. And I was recently vaccinated.
Yes. And I did want to ask you about that because especially with all of the like anti-vaxxing rhetoric that's out there, and definitely, don't want to get like too political or anything like that. But it was, for me, it was really refreshing to see someone, because, you see like politicians, the vice president, and then you see, members of Senate and House of Representatives, they're all getting theirs on television and it's this big to do. But then you see someone like yourself who is literally, because the way that I think of it, I'm a little bit of a comic book nerd. So like if you're in the Justice League, if you're in that clubhouse, right? It doesn't matter if you're Superman or if you're one of the Wonder Twins, you're still a superhero. You know what I mean? Like, so to see someone like you, especially with the following that you have, because since the show, I mean, I'm sure your Instagram is and like your following and stuff like that is just blown way up than, what you're used to before. But for me, it just came off as really brave for you to be like, hey, I'm going to get this vaccine. And then not only did you get the vaccine, but you were letting people know about like any side effects and stuff that you had afterwards. So what was the thought process behind that for you for sharing that journey?
So I think it's important for people to understand about the COVID vaccine. I got the shot about 3 weeks ago. I actually get my second shot on Wednesday. So I'll be doing another update then and how I'm feeling and how things are going. And I was really surprised at the outreach that I got. I think people were genuinely concerned and just curious about, what does this mean? How is this going to affect me? I have X, Y, and Z diagnosis. Should I get the vaccine? And of course, can't give too much medical advice, but I think the more people that were very interested and curious about how my experience was, I hope that will bring people to get vaccinated. I kind of joke that like my body's building spikes right now with the vaccine. I feel like that's the simplest way to put it. But I just think that the more people that show that, hey, we got the vaccine, we're feeling great. Yeah, there could be some side effects that happen 10, 20 years down the road. But I think at this day and age, with how serious this pandemic is, if I can prevent myself and my family from getting COVID, then why not? Why not get two simple shots, I should say, and just try to protect ourselves, and hopefully we can stop the spread of this virus.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm right there with you. I think it's a little naive to say that, like, there are people out there that are like, you don't have to worry about side effects of vaccines and stuff, like, because there is a percentage where that does happen. But I think you're 100% on track. Does the benefit outweigh the risk? And I've talked about on the show, but we have a 2-year-old. And so we've just gone through, every vaccination you could possibly get for a kid. And I mean, she's fine. So at least now, we'll, who knows, like you said, years down the line. But right now she seems solid. She can walk, she can talk. She's like a normal human, which is good. So
yeah, I tell my patients a lot of times, I'm like, if someone sneezes, it's written as a side effect. So if you read the pamphlets of any drug medication, there's so many side effects or things that could happen. So I'm like, anything can happen to anybody. And there's always going to be that small percentage of people who have a bad reaction to something. But the general population and most people will do relatively well with the vaccine.
Yeah. And, my wife she works in the medical field, but through like drug rehabilitation. And so, they're starting to open it up to them now. And I was like, do I get to piggyback since like, I'm like, do I get to cut the line or anything like that? She's like, nope, you don't. So yeah, I'm one of those people. I'm just like, as soon as I can get it, I just, I miss, and I'm sure you can relate to this because this all happened when you started, filming the show and going into the show with this set of expectations. And then it's like, oh, I can't go to a baseball game, or I can't go. I mean, you're a huge Saints fan, so you can't.
I haven't been to a game yet.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's a crazy world. So I'm with you. I think that if this helps in the slightest and allows us to get back to something somewhat normal,
right.
Number one, I think it's something that everyone should do. And then number two, again, I think you're incredibly brave. And I think it's a great example of how to use your platform for good to say, like, let me show people my journey. So, I just hope other people appreciate it as much as I did, because I thought that was very, very cool.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. I just hope that I can spread some positivity and just like help you, encourage people. Like I said, most people were genuinely wanting to know about how it was. There were a few, people who said, best of luck to you. But for the most part, people are like, thanks so much. Like, I really want to know how this is going to affect somebody.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it's, I'm sure you've got mixed bag of messages, but it's just cool to see someone. And again, I know now, like, you're considered a TV personality. And let me ask you this. Do you consider yourself, like, after going through the process, I was going to ask you this a little bit later, but since we're talking about it, like, do you consider yourself now like a television personality, or do you just look at yourself as, hey, I'm still, Olivia, I just happened to be on TV for a little while?
I'm just Olivia, a nurse practitioner who works like a dog, doesn't take time off, and just happened to be on a TV show.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons I've felt very grateful that you came on, that you were willing to like sit down and talk tonight, because watching the show, I knew, like, okay, you work like crazy hours, and that was a big concern for you. And we'll talk about that more when we get into the show. But it was, again, just super, super grateful that you were willing to come in and hang out. I did want to ask, have you, since the show has happened, like, has anybody like recognized you, like, coming into the hospital or anything like that? Like, oh my God, like, I know you. Anything like that?
I had I got my first recognition at work, and it was actually just 2 weeks ago. I was actually doing. Can you hear my text messages going through?
No, you're totally fine.
Okay. I did get recognized for the first time like 2 weeks ago. I was actually doing a family meeting with a group of family members, and when we were finished, one was like, "Hey, were you on Married at First Sight?" I I was like, yeah. And of course, I have my hair a mess and a mask on, no makeup. And he was like, I just recognized your eyes. He was like, I've looked at you. And I was like, I know that face. So that was really weird just because at work, I'm just me. I'm just Olivia. I'm the nurse practitioner. I take care of people. On the streets, even, it's weird when people say, like, hey, you're from Married at First Sight. I know you. And I'm always like, my first reaction is like, oh, do you go to Tulane? Do you work at Tulane? Not like, oh yeah, Olivia, you were on a TV show.
Right.
So.
Yeah. You were in people's homes and it's crazy too, because there is Married at First Sight fan groups on Facebook and like all these social media platforms, and people like are so yes, maybe I'm a member of one or two, but it's crazy because like I'm a fan, but there are people out there who are like super fans. Like they see someone at an amusement park that was on the show like years ago, and they're like, I had to stop this person and take a picture. And like that just made their whole, generation from running into this. Do you think that because we're in COVID right now and that, everyone's wearing a mask everywhere, do you think that has made things maybe a little easier for you on the recognition front? Because I just thinking about like people who are maybe on like season 9 or season 10 before all this happened, and they're out, without, I don't want to even call it a luxury that we're wearing face masks everywhere, but like something covering 70% of your face. Like, do you feel like it might be a little bit more intense if that wasn't going on?
I've kind of said I feel like we're a little lucky in the sense that we get to wear masks all the time. New Orleans, though, is a city where we have a lot of film people here and a lot of famous people just walking the street like normal people, and nobody bothers them. And so I find it more uncomfortable for me when I'm sitting at a restaurant and people just stare. Because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, I know that you've recognized me, but can you just wave so we can just like do an awkward like, hey, that would make me feel more comfortable. But I do think, like, surprisingly, people recognize me in the most weird situations. Like I have a little moped scooter and I had my helmet on, my sunglasses on. I didn't have a mask on. And this lady walks by and she's like, hey, I know you. And I'm like, I'm on my scooter with a helmet on and sunglasses.
So like, she's 11.
So it's like hit or miss. I don't really know. Like I'm like, how do people recognize me with my mask on? Like, this is literally all you see is my eyes and my forehead.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, it's weird. It still catches me off guard, but I don't know. I don't know if the mask makes a difference or not.
Well, I did want to ask, kind of transitioning into the show and stuff like that. So, were you a fan of the show like prior to like submitting a request to be on or putting in the application? Like, was it something that you had watched before? Or the only reason I ask is as I told you, I had Mindy on from season 10 and she was like, I'd never watched the show. And someone said this, this would be perfect for you. And so I, just signed up for it. And in my head, I was like, man, that's crazy to like not even know. It's a crazy enough process as it is. But then to like not know anything about the process and kind of jump in. So was it something that, were you like me and my wife, where you're like, yeah, next season, I can't wait? Or was it just kind of like a blind jump for you?
Oh no, I watched the show. I've probably missed like 2 or 3 seasons throughout the course of the 11, now 12 seasons. And I used to watch it many moons ago with a significant other. And then I moved to New Orleans and made my cousin start watching it. And I always sat back and was like, I could do this. Like, I am go with the flow. I'm not super needy. Like, I like my space. As long as you got the right personality and you're in it for the right reasons, I could do this. So she actually sent me the screenshot when we were watching, I think it was 9, it might have been 10, season 10. Maybe, and they had put in the bottom of the TV like casting in New Orleans. So she had sent me the picture of it, and I was like, oh my gosh. She was like, well, are you going to sign up? And I was like, yeah, because her biggest thing was like, you can't do this, you're not moving anywhere, you can't go anywhere, you're fine. And then they sent it, so I signed up, being a fan of the show and watching the show and really thinking that if you're doing this for the right reasons, you can make it work. So yeah, I put in my application and one thing led to another, and here I am.
Now that's very, because to me, I think it's interesting either way. Because, as someone who watches a show, you see like the success rate versus like the the rate of, you know, couples who don't work out. And then you kind of get invested. So like in my head, I know myself, and I'm, you know, I'm married and stuff like that. If anything ever happened between me and my wife, I've said it before, I'm done. Like just the one time and I'm done. We've been together 7 years now and married for 4. So we're doing all right. So, yeah, I'm just like, what was it specifically? Cause I know that you said like, you know, oh, I could do this, but like, was it just a sense of like, were you tired of dating, or was it like, you know, you had dated, but it just, you know, wasn't working out the way that you like? What was it other than like the confidence of like, oh, I could do this, that kind of pulled you into wanting to sign up?
So I was in a serious relationship that was about 4 years long, and we split up and I moved to New Orleans, and I just really indulged myself into my job and just working and just focusing on my career and where I was going there. And then probably 2 years after being in New Orleans, I've been here for 4 or 5 years. I've been here since 2017. I decided to do Bumble, and I went on a couple dates, and then I just found that like swiping is just so shallow. Like you sit there and you just swipe, swipe, swipe. And most of the times I'm like, I'm just judging these people that could be really genuinely nice people based on the photos they choose to pick on this profile. And so I was like, that's just not for me. And so I was like, you know what? Married at First Sight's coming here. I really want to be married to somebody and just be in a committed relationship. Why not give it a chance? I was someone who always said like, I don't ever want to get divorced. But I think kind of in this day and age, like life's too short to settle. And so I just put that in the back of my mind and said, you know, I'm going to give it a 50-50 chance. And if I match with someone who has the same personality and drive to make this work as I do, then we'll be successful. We'll work through it and we'll work through the problems.
Yeah, I think I can see that, you know, especially because, you know, used to be like, you know, when, I mean, even my parents or like my grandparents, it's like, you know, you met somebody at a bowling alley or like at a coffee shop, and like you just happen to, you know, you like maybe you bump into each other and you just spark up a conversation or something like that. Mm-hmm. Where now it's very much just like you said, I'm just swiping. So this person could be super, super interesting, but if it's not stimulating my eyes immediately, we're kind of missing that chance, you know?
Yeah. And I always say that sorry to interrupt. I always say like, if I was out at a bar pre-COVID, and someone approached me and just said, hey, like started talking to me and just said, you know, you seem like a really nice person. I'd like to take you out. I would go 100%, because people don't approach people anymore. It's like, you know, you don't meet at the coffee shop. You don't meet at the bowling alley. And I just think it's so a little bit old school that I like, you know, something that people used to do and had the courage to do that and not just hide behind technology and dating apps and social media to like ask somebody out on a date.
Yeah, I think the best example of that is, you know, I grew up when like Friends was a huge thing, and people kept asking, like, especially recently in like the age of like reboots and reunions, they asked all the cast, they were like, when are you going to do your reunion or like the comeback? And they were like, can you imagine if we did that show now? It would just be a bunch of friends sitting in a coffee shop on their phones. Like nobody would be talking to each other. You know what I mean? So I think I don't know. I think it's you know, I think everyone has like a sense of nostalgia about some things, and I don't ever want to sound like well, back in my day, you know what I mean? But like, I am like, and I feel like we're probably right in the same age group, but it's, you know, we were the last generation of people that remember like having a landline phone, or, you know, like I used to get into like fist fights with my sister.
Watching the TV guide.
Yep. Yeah. Watching the TV guide to be like, what's on in the next hour? Because that's as far as you can see.
And you have to watch the whole thing over. Nobody knows what that's like.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being in middle school and like even into high school, like I was dating a girl and my sister had her boyfriend, and we would literally be like, if you don't get off that phone, I'm going to kill you. It would just be like, you know, and like, or you'd be getting on when the internet first came on, like, you know, you'd be on America Online and somebody pick up the phone and like crash everything. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know. And I think about that too with my daughter, because you know, my daughter's only 2. So it's like, this is how we are now. What's it going to be like by the time she starts dating, or heaven forbid, she's 2 years old and I can't even fathom that thought now. But like, what is the world going to look like when she's my age? You know what I mean? I don't know. That's enough my old man soapbox, but
Since we're talking about your 2-year-old daughter, what if your daughter came to you and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to marry a stranger"? What would you say? Would you let her do it?
So me and my wife have actually talked about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, in other cultures, arranged marriages are like the normal, and people get married and they're together for years. You know what I mean? Like, excuse me. So my thing now, would I immediately be like, that's a great idea, I'm 100% on board? I definitely think I would be accepting of it, but I'd want to probe a little bit into what her reason is. Is it, excuse me, is it just that you want to be on television, or is it that, you think this could really be an opportunity to genuinely find somebody? And if it's that, this is where my mindset is, this is where my heart is leading me, I'm cool with it. I grew up, I grew up playing music, and my whole thing was like, I'm not going to college. I'm going to be selling out arenas. And I chased that. And yeah, it didn't work out exactly the way that I wanted to, but I'm happy that I have the experience and the stories and the lessons and that I learned from it. So I wouldn't want to ever be the dad that deprive my kid of having that same journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you're like, oh, me and my wife, we've already talked about this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my wife has also said, do you think they would take me on the show if I just didn't tell them I was married? I was like, I think they would figure it out.
I don't know. I haven't watched the new season, but it sounds like there's some drama.
Yeah. Now, okay. I was going to ask you this a little bit later, but did you watch the matchmaking special?
I haven't watched it yet. I'm planning on it, but I was going to let a couple episodes back up before I started watching the whole thing. But I've had people message me that I kind of talked with the show on Instagram with a little bit on my season. And one is, she's talking to me and she was like, well, how did they not figure this out? And I'm like, I don't know.
And like I told you, I may or may not be in some of those Married at First Sight fan groups on Facebook, but if I
just
was,
be the kind one, be the sweet one.
Oh, I am for sure. Oh, I am 110%. But you get it's so crazy that that matchmaking special came out and then people are already making determinations on somebody. Like I believe one of the gentlemen said that they wanted someone who was very submissive, to him, and it was all these ladies were like, did he just say he wanted a submissive woman? I was just, okay, it's the matchmaking special, let's it's a whole season, let's let it play out before you hang this dude somewhere.
The minute our pictures showed up on social media, just the one wedding photo, when they showed who we were, I would read the comments and I'm like, you're looking at one photo of two people and you are making so many speculations. Sometimes I sat back and laughed and sometimes I'm like, God, people are really mean.
Yeah, now let me ask you that, since have you gotten better at looking at the comments and stuff like that? Because that's the one thing I've found with the show. It's people who are invested, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, even if you were season 11 and we're on season 20 now, there are still people that are Olivia is my girl. I follow her on Instagram. I watch what she's doing. So have you gotten better at kind of staying out of the comments and things like that? Or is it, because I'm the kind of guy where if this show ever gets big enough where I get tons of hate comments, I'm going to just scroll through all of them. I'm just going to be I want to know how much people hate me.
First is you get I would say I'm not a bit, I don't really, I have Twitter, but I don't have Twitter. I don't know how to tweet. I have Instagram and I have Facebook and Reddit. And I find that I would get emails from Reddit that are oh, this, and that, what you follow. And I had followed the Married at First Sight one pre me even getting matched on Married at First Sight, but never really delve into it and commented on anything. And I would say Reddit was probably the hardest thing to read through. There was a time where people were just really hateful and just making very mean speculations about someone they don't even know. And you want to so bad just be and just say your piece, and you just can't. And so there would be nights where I would just scroll through it and scroll through it and scroll through it, and it would bring me to tears sometimes. And then I'm just like, you know what? This person doesn't know me. This person knows nothing about me. They are just making assumptions. But when you feel like you're just trying to be a good person and people are like bashing your character, it's like, what do I do? So I'm just like, you don't know me. And now that my social media is, I have my Instagram public. Now that it's public, the most people want to like know about me and genuinely are nice to me. And then there's the one that's occasionally just like picks and picks and picks. And I'm just like, block. I don't need you. I don't need you as a follower. I don't need you in my life. This is my life that I'm choosing to share with you. And I don't need the negativity, but it's very hard. So don't ever read comments about anything.
Yeah, we're not at that level. Most of the comments we get are my mom being like, you did a great job. Really like this episode.
I'll start commenting on everything.
Oh, please. But you know, it just makes me curious because I think you're right. I think that, and for some reason too, I think people kind of rejoice the ability to like be hateful randomly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I've never met this person. And even when you're on a TV show, it's not like, you know, and again, Married at First Sight I think is kind of a rare horse because of the fact that like, you know, they do essentially live with you and things like that. But I imagine that it's still, even if you're living with something like that, it still may be hard for you to be like, here's 100% of who I am. You know what I mean? Because you're still very aware of, you know, this is going to be on TV and I'm, you know, being filmed all the time. So, you know, for someone to sit down and without, you know, ever having a conversation with you or anything like that, to just kind of try to trash your day by, you know, and I wonder too, if they're like, I hope that she sees this, or if it's just like, you know, she'll probably never see this, but it's, you know, I just don't, I feel, you know? Yeah. I'm only like that with Ted Cruz. He's the only guy. I'm not a Ted Cruz fan. And if you follow my Twitter, you'll know that I'm not a Ted Cruz fan. But I very much want him to see that. So I'm not hiding it. But you know, speaking of parents, one thing that kind of stuck out to me watching it, I know that your mom, when we're talking about parents being supportive and things like that, she definitely had her reservations with you going into the show. So what was it like for you to deal with that, you know, in your relationship? It seems like, you know, through watching the show, she was, you know, definitely supportive, but voicing, you know, what concerns she had. Did she seem to come around a little bit? Or was it, because I would like to imagine that it wasn't, you know, when everything was said and done, it wasn't like, well, I told you shouldn't have done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I talk to my mom every morning. And it's kind of like our morning routine. I call her on my drive to work and we just kind of catch up. Nothing, small talk. Hey, how you doing? And so she is the one person who, if she would have said absolutely not, I wouldn't have done it. You know, you have like I have a sister and I have my dad's, and it's like if they would have like chimed in, I'd be like, okay, fine, whatever. But like really thinking about my mom, I'd be like, oh, I can't do this if she's not acceptable to it. So I actually told my mom a long time, like when I probably, so we'll talk timeline for just a second. It takes a long time to go through all the interviews and all the beginning stuff before you actually get matched. And so I told my parents pretty early on, I think it was the summertime when we actually started applying and having like Skype interviews and stuff. And, you know, I told them just so I could get her on board because I knew it would take her a little bit longer. And she knew that I always wanted to be married, and she knows that I kind of just do whatever I want despite her advice. And she comes around. So I just had to like, you know, work on her a little bit. And then of course, you know, when you're filming and they're asking the questions and all those feelings come up, and she has never to this day said you shouldn't have done it. She's really disappointed on how it turned out. And side note, she wishes Henry was her son-in-law.
Oh, we'll get to Henry. I've got some questions, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing them. But when I asked you at the beginning if there was anything that was off limits, you did not mention that. So I got some questions.
Oh, my mom will be thrilled. But it took her. She was the one that I had told first. And just really, as I knew if I had her in my corner, then she could help me get everybody else in the corner as well. And so, I just talked to her about it, and we had a lot of difficult conversations about what I wanted in a spouse, how I want to live my life. And, I'm already kind of different from my family as far as like beliefs and stuff. And so I just try to be open and honest with them on how I feel about things. And this was one. And some of my family still doesn't understand it, but most of them have jumped on the bandwagon and really enjoyed watching the TV show, including my 91-year-old grandmother.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and I do have a question about that as we get a little bit further on, but I did want to kind of jump into, so like you go through, right? You've met the experts, which is a fan of the show. I mean,
hang on, can I interrupt you? Is she really loud? Can you hear her?
No.
She's tumbling my shoes across the living room.
that is also the celebrity cat that accompanied you throughout the season as well.
Oh, the bully cat.
Yeah. Well, you gotta take care. You gotta show the weak ones where they lay. So.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're okay. But I wanted to ask. So, like, especially as a fan of the show, right? Like, you apply, things like that, and then all of a sudden, like, because again, this was before COVID. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, like, you're sitting in front of Dr. Viviana and Dr. Pepper and Dr. Cal or Pastor Cal, and like, what is that feeling like? Because for me, and I don't know if I get like a little bit of shade for this because I'm a guy and I'm so into the show, but like if I met like even Dr. Pepper reminds me of my mom. You know what I mean? Like I just want to like hug her and be like, I fucking love you, Mom. You know what I mean? But like, I would be super excited and I would have so many questions. So like to be in that seat, being someone who's followed the show for so long, like what was the thought process in that moment?
So when you first get to meet them, and this might be TMI, but when you first get to meet them, you go into a room during these workshops and you get literally just minutes with each one of them. And so you just don't know if you don't want to say the wrong thing, but you want to be honest with them because you want them to find the right person for you. And you get a little starstruck because I'm like, I know these people. I'm sure half these people in here don't really know like what these people mean. And so I was really starstruck. I think I was more starstruck with Pastor Cal than anybody, just because I'm a big P-Cal fan. Like he shoots it straight, and when he's in your corner, he's in your corner. And it was very nerve-wracking, and you just don't know what to do, don't know what to say. You want to make sure everything's right, but you also just want to be your vulnerable self so that you get the right person. But it was cool. It was weird to like finally like walk in and you're like, oh, y'all are on TV. Like, y'all are the experts. Y'all are right here, like, face to face with me. It was really a cool experience.
Yeah, and Pastor Cal, he's that kind of guy who, like, he has a swag that you can tell through the television. So I can't imagine those suits, dude. Those suits. Every time I'm like, wherever he shops, I need to make that kind of money where I can just be like, every suit Pastor Cal has, that's what I want. Because
you get to hug him like he just hugs, and he's just sweet. It was just like you were sitting there on the couch with them the whole time. It was a really cool experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I'd be fanboying a little bit. I'd be like,
oh my God. I was like, I think I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. I can't talk. I only have 2 minutes. What do I say?
Right. Well, okay. And so you find out that you're matched, right? And then, you're going through, you had some really incredible supportive friends too, that, I think it's always cool when you're able to, I think it's always cool, especially because again, kind of making this decision, there could be so much like negative connotation with it that when somebody comes on and they have like a support circle that's really tight and very supportive and uplifting, it's I can imagine make the process a lot easier. But so you find out that you're matched, you're getting married, you pick out your wedding dress, like you're standing there, and then, you start coming down the aisle and Brett is there. What are your initial thoughts in that moment?
I was happy. I was like, oh, let me just start off. Your first thought when you go through this whole process is like worst case scenario. Like he could look like this, he could like do this and that and this, and you make him out to be the worst person in the world. I'm sorry. That's what I did. I don't know if everybody else did. And so you just like set yourself up like, okay, it could be bad, but what if it's great? And so when I walked down the aisle and I saw Brett, I'm like, oh, like he's tall, he's attractive, he's good looking, he's got pretty eyes, like he looks like he works out. I'm like, it could be way worse. And so genuinely I was like, whew, like, okay, they did okay with the looks. It's going to be okay.
Just like kind of like that. Because I'm the same way. I'm very much like, okay, when I make a decision first, let me think about every negative thing that could happen. And then once I've worked through that, I'm like, okay, I'm good. That's kind of like, let's go forward with it. So I can imagine there was probably like, just like a giant sense of relief in that moment. And also, again, being somebody who's watched the show, I could imagine myself being like, oh man, well, I really hope I don't get a so-and-so from season 4. Like that would be, without saying any names, and not even season 4. I just use that as an example, but just being like, oh, I remember this one, and that guy was, a real jerk. I hope I don't, you know what I mean? So, and then you find out that he had a cat, which I've never seen anyone be like genuinely more excited about something in that moment. Obviously, if for people who may be watching this, we see your cat running around the back, like we see your dog, people who watch the show, you're an animal lover. So in that moment, it seems like you were feeling pretty optimistic.
Oh, hold on.
No problem.
Eleanor. No, ma'am. No. Speaking of loving animals, she has this habit of she's soaking wet. You are.
Is she splashing in her water bowl?
Yes, swimming. Get down. I was like, what is that loud noise? It sounded like the wash machine. No, you're wet. Come here.
Yeah,
Come
we have a dog named Mrs. Bradley Cooper.
I'm soaking wet.
Oh, man.
Soaking wet.
Those eyes, though. Those blue eyes. So if you're listening, Olivia's holding up her new dog, which we're gonna ask some questions about Eleanor here in a little bit as well. But she's got beautiful blue eyes. Pause it. Go to the YouTube. Watch it there. We have a little dog. Mrs. Bradley Cooper is what I named her. She showed up at the house, and I didn't realize that she was a she, and I didn't know her that well, so I wasn't going to check. And so I said, "You're very handsome. I'm going to call you Mr. Bradley Cooper." And then my mother-in-law came over and was like, "This is a lady." And I was like, "Well, I already named her. This is Mrs. Bradley Cooper."
Mrs. Bradley Cooper. That's cute.
So my neighbors think I'm crazy because I'm outside. Bradley Cooper. Yelling for the dog to come in. But when you found out that the person that you were matched with is an animal lover as well, because I know that was a big thing for you. Like, was that kind of like an additional sigh of relief in that moment?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So being a cat person, I love all animals. We'll just start right there. But being someone who has cats, it was a deal breaker. Like, you don't have to love them. You don't really have to like them, but you have to tolerate them because they're going to be here, and it's like a 20-year commitment. So they're here, despite whether you like them or not. And so just meeting that Brett had a cat was just like, oh, that was another weight lifted off my shoulders just right in the beginning. And so I just felt like, okay, we're off to a good start. Like, he has a cat. He's good looking. He's attractive. Like, okay, we're doing okay here.
Yeah, and I think part of it for me would be like, yo, dude, like, we just met. Like, I've known this cat for years. Like if you're not on board, like, sorry. You know what I mean? Like, I've made a commitment to this cat long before I even thought about you. So, so I wanted to ask, like, so it seemed like in the beginning, the wedding day, and especially, I mean, for the situation, right? Because you guys barely know each other, but it seems like, you were in the beginning, you were initially happy. It seemed like you were excited on your wedding day, and then you guys go on the honeymoon, and the honeymoon like starts off okay, but then you kind of start hitting some rocky spots, and I know one of them was, he wanted to have kids right away, and you were someone that you were just like, maybe, which I think is fair, especially when you've only known someone for the amount of time. I mean, at that point, it's like less than a week by the time you're on your honeymoon and stuff like that. So, like, what were you feeling in that moment? Because in the show, there is a lot of there's a lot of emotion like tied to it. And when somebody's watching, they're kind of watching the emotion in that moment. But when you look back at it, it's like, what do you think those feelings were? Or I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, is that something I guess like you would have been willing to like work through, or was it like looking back, was it a signal like, hey, this isn't going to work? Or, talk to me a little bit about what that conflict was like.
Yeah, so I've always been someone that says, like, I prefer to not have children, but if I did, like, of course I'd love my children. And if I found the right person, then, yeah, and they wanted kids and that was a big thing for them, then I would consider it. But I think my whole thing about having children is, like, I don't feel very maternal. And then the world that we live in is just a scary place. And so I never told Brett that I didn't want to have kids. It was just like, I'm indifferent. I really don't want to, but like if we got there in our relationship and that's something that was going to like better us and make us stronger and we were there together, then sure. And he just took it as like, nope, she doesn't want to have kids. And so I think when it was completely shut down, it was very difficult to get past that and really just try to explain myself and help him to understand where I was coming from on having children. And, I couldn't be any more honest about it. I felt like I was pretty clear with that. And, I think at the end of the day, like if that's something that he really wants and he wants to be married and have children and have a family right away, then I'm not the girl for that. And, I think it put a lot of hindrance on our relationship right from the beginning, really.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, I tend to overshare about myself on the show. I'm sure people are like, dude, we don't care. But, when I met my wife was very much, it was interesting watching that dynamic, because when I met my wife, she was very much, I don't ever want to have kids. And I was someone who was like, oh, I've always, I didn't have the best relationship with my dad. So I always saw myself being a dad so I could kind of make up for that. And so I always saw myself having kids, but it was never like a pressure you situation or anything like that. And then eventually she was like, I think I want to have one. And I think it just kind of speaks to like, if you meet the right person and enough time has passed, then that can work. And then we're also very similar to you now, where we have the one and like, we love her and all, like we're keeping her. She's 2. We're not like, she won't fit in a basket to drop off at the fire station or anything. But like especially now since COVID has hit, we're like, I don't know if we would ever, want to have another one, because the world, apparently the world, we had this one and the world got set on fire. So maybe, we should hold off for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, was that, did that cause you, do you feel like that caused you to kind of like shut down a little bit? Like once you were kind of, because I know you said like you couldn't get past it. So was that, did you feel yourself kind of being like, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter? Because I will say this about Brett, and I'm not somebody who likes to like trash people or put people down or anything like that, but I did feel like he spent a lot of time in your conversations kind of mansplaining things to you. And especially like when you're talking about like your budget, you know what I mean? And you're like, hey, dude, I know how to use a spreadsheet. Like, how many years you have to go to school to be a nurse or nurse practitioner? Like
6.
Yeah, 6 years. Like, I'm sure you've worked with a damn spreadsheet in your life. You know what I mean? So I really know, and we're very much a family of like, again, my wife's in the medical field and social work aspect. So we are very like, we validate each other's feelings and, like, we are respectful to one another because that's how you're supposed to be. So watching that, I was like, I told my wife, I was like, if I talk to you like that, you'd smack the teeth out of my mouth. So did that kind of like, the situation with the kids and then like the mansplaining aspect, did you just feel yourself like shutting down at some point? Because, again, we'll get into it, but at one point, like you come home, he's just gone. And you can tell that you're upset, but I'm wondering like if it was like you're upset because you knew it was inevitable, or if you were upset or like you knew it was inevitable and the inevitable happened, or if you were open to the point where it was like, oh, I just didn't think it would happen like this. So I guess that's kind of my question. Like, how shut down were you, I guess?
I wouldn't say the kids thing shut me down. I think he harped on that a lot. And, I just tried to explain to him, like, I'm not saying never, like, I'm not saying never, ever, ever. And so that got exhausting, but it was a big deal to him, and I just couldn't, explain it to him any better. I think what started shutting me down was like just always being met with resistance. We would sit down and we would talk about these things, and it would just be talking in circles and no real resolution or no real answer. And so, no real answer. And so it was just like, after you do this over and over and over and have so many different conversations about different topics, and the whole budget thing was a whole nother topic. And you just are always like, it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. That's how I felt. Like every time I tried to explain myself or say something, it was like, I say I like to drink nice wine and I don't really want this, and I like nice things. It was like, well, I do this and I whatever. It was like it was just always something. It was never a smooth conversation. It was never an open, honest conversation. It just wears on you. And at the end I was like, this is not how I want to live the rest of my life. Gosh, yes, I want to be a wife and I want to have this life partner. But if this is how difficult it has to be every day over every little thing, then this is not for me. And when I came home, so I went to my parents' house during the weekend that he moved out. And we had discussed that, and it was all kind of during quarantine and what was going to happen with our apartments we were living in, and just a whole lot of things were up in the air at the time. And so our decision day, of course, got pushed back, as everybody knows, because we filmed longer than the 8 weeks. But his plan was to move out on the original decision day, which was the following weekend. And so I went home to see my family, and this was kind of like my last thing to like just get out of the city, kind of put COVID to the side. Not really, but like just go home to my parents. Just go to my parents' house,
make sure they're okay.
Yeah, and just like go to my mom and be like, okay, this is where I'm at. Like decision day is approaching. This is how I'm feeling. I need some guidance, and I need help, and I need support. And so I went to see my parents, and when I came back, I was expecting him to be at the apartment because he had said while I was gone, he was going to move some of his things home because he was planning to move home the following week. And when I got home, everything was gone, and just the cat was supposed to be gone, and just some of his stuff. Well, everything was gone, and he had no intentions of coming back to the apartment that night. And so it wasn't like I knew that it wasn't going to happen. Like I knew that it was going to happen. Clearly we were both had already, I feel like at this point might not have even recommitted maybe, or I can't even remember the time frame, but I knew it was going to happen. It was just the sense of like, you are moving out. You're moving out a whole week early. We could have had that whole week to plan like how we were going to move forward. Like, are you going to come to the apartments on Mondays and Tuesdays, and on Wednesdays and Thursdays I go over to your house and we cook dinner, or I stay the night, or whatever. There was none of that. Like, how are we going to make this work with you moving home? Because at this point it wasn't recommitment. We had decided like, okay, he's moving out. What are we going to do? And so I was hurt. My feelings, I cry when my feelings are hurt, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, when I'm mad. Like, I'm just a crier.
It's the default emotion, or like the default.
And so I'm just like,
action.
If you hurt my feelings, I cry, whether it be good, bad, or ugly. And so I just feel like I was just kind of blindsided by it because he was not supposed to move out for another week. So it's like I knew it was coming, but I wasn't expecting it when I had just driven 5 hours from my family's house and showed up in the evening time to have a conversation with my husband, and he was not there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I was watching it, I looked at my wife and I said, like, that's like some serious cowardice, because the thing that stuck out to me is like, oh, you waited until you knew that she wasn't going to be there. And then you were like, let me just pack up all my stuff. So there's no conversation. I don't have to have the confrontation about it. I don't have to, explain why I'm making the decision that I'm making. I mean, I remember you said very specifically, like, you took all the food out of the damn cupboards. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like it didn't seem at all like I'm going to move my stuff back and then we'll work out a schedule. It was almost like his way of like making a point to be like, all right, like, I'm out. Peace. You know what I mean?
And so I think at that point I had already started to feel like I was giving up. And then the following day, which they don't show, we did some diary cams. On Monday, we had decided, because it was a Sunday, I came home on a Monday, we had decided that we had expert homework that we needed to work on. And so he was originally going to come to the apartment, and then last minute said, hey, do you just want to come to my house? So I drove all the way to his house, and I thought it would be good. We were doing a homework on like our childhoods and what we looked like during our childhood and how our childhoods were. And I thought this would be a great exercise to do so that I could understand how Brett got from point A to point B, because Brett hadn't always been the Brett that he is today. You could tell that there's been some stuff that has happened in his life. And so I was like, if we go back to the childhood and see, how things evolved, and, we both came from divorced families. And so I thought it would be good. Well, when the conversation got difficult, he had asked me to leave. He said, I think it's time for you to go. And so I left. I diary cammed it. I left. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I came over here to work on things after you moved out of our house without telling me. I'm just done. Like, that was my, 100% I'm done.
Yeah. And especially when you're, I'm a married man, and I can't imagine like getting into an argument with my wife and being like, okay, it's time for you to go now. It's like, it doesn't work. Like, I can imagine myself being, that way. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm going to go on a drive so I can cool off. I'll be home in a little bit, but I can't ever imagine being like, you need to get out of the house. I don't know. I think it's a trend that I saw. And again, this isn't like, trying to bash anybody or anything like that, but it's just what I felt when I was watching it is, again, to me, that seems very cowardly, where I don't want to have this difficult conversation, so you need to leave. Or, when he leaves, when you're out of town. Or the other thing is, there's one of the episodes, he goes and he goes and gets like a drink or something with a buddy of his. And he was talking about, how you don't know how to budget, and, kind of being disrespectful about Pastor Cal and stuff like that. And it's all like, if you can't express that to the person that you're supposed to be, like, if you have to go, and I get it, I'm a guy, like, I have conversations with my guy friends that I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing, in the same way to my wife. But if it was an issue that affected like how we lived our life, and it was a general, a genuine concern, I would communicate that to my wife, as opposed to just, kind of bitching about it behind her back on television. Cause it's not like you're not going to see it. You know what I mean? So,
nope. And all this I get to see after the fact.
Yeah.
So it was real nice.
Yeah. And like, okay, I've got two specific things that I want to ask you about, kind of in relation to you watching it after the fact. So one is, because I think your season will kind of always have this infamy around it of the old 1 to 10 scale, right? Because when you were asked, you were like, oh yeah, it's like what was it, like a 7 or 8? Like it was
7.5.
Yeah, it was, fairly high. And he got very like, it's degrading of the relationship, and it's not a equal blah, 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 blah. And so what do you think, being on the other side of it now, because I know that the reason that he gave, but being on the other side of it now, what do you think like the big issue was with that question in that moment? Because to me, and I'm like you, I'm going to be very honest. If I get sad about something, my like go-to emotion is to cry. If I am like angry about something, I'm just like, I'm so angry, and I cry, what I mean? But I just did not understand the emotional thought process behind that, like the response in that situation from him. So what do you think it was, kind of being on the backside of it now?
I think Brett's just difficult.
Fair enough.
I think that there's never a straight answer, and I will have to say that, like, I still think it's silly that he didn't answer it, but he and I had an off-camera conversation where he told me how bad it hurt his feelings because he felt like he was trying really hard and putting forth a lot of effort into our marriage at this point. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not like rating our marriage altogether. It's like, where are you now? How are you feeling? And I'm like, 5 is meh, 10 is perfect, 7.5 is great. And so I think that it was just another thing where he didn't want to answer the question and he didn't want to participate. And I think genuinely it probably hurt his feelings, but I just don't think it came off that way, if that makes any sense. Like,
yeah, no, it definitely does.
Answer it. Pick a number. Like, pick a number. That's how I saw it. Okay, I'm just going to pick a number. Everybody else is. Just pick a number.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I thought. And I think the big thing that stuck out to me too is it felt like it was like that reaction was coming from someone who hadn't been in a serious relationship. Because with my wife and I, like, yeah, we have some days or maybe a week where it's like our marriage is a 10 out of 10. And then we have like 2 weeks where it's like, it's a 4 and she can barely stand me. You know what I mean? But that's part of, when you're together for a decade, like it's unrealistic to think that you're always going to be like, yeah, everything's great. 10, 10. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Like you have shared responsibilities and burdens and shared happinesses and things like that. So I don't know, it felt to me, especially how he acted that night when you guys were back and you're just trying to like have a conversation with him and you were getting shut down and obviously getting justifiably emotional about his responses back. It just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is Christina and that conversation that you had with her where she referred to him as a fuckboy, essentially. Pardon my language for anyone who's listening, but
that's what the word was.
Yes. So I wanted to ask, watching the show back and being, again, on the other side of it, do you feel differently about that conversation now than you did in the moment? Because I've got so many things about Christina that I could say that's just insane. But I couldn't tell in the moment if that concern for you was genuine or if it was like trying to inject herself into like the drama that was going on. So on the back end, like how do you see that conversation now?
Then I felt like, what the hell? My first thought when we got finished filming that was, Brett, did you date her? Was she one of the 45 women? Like, how is she making so many assumptions when she's known you for 10 minutes? Like, I haven't even spent as much time with you, and she's making all these accusations about, like, she has seen these red flags in behavior. And so my initial thought was like, what the heck? These two know each other. They've had to have dated. Like, how else would she be saying these things? But looking back at it and watching it over and having a relationship with Christina, I think she was genuinely saw these red flags and has seen these behaviors in people that she had dated in the past and was genuinely concerned for me. And so I feel bad. I feel like I reacted okay in the sense of like someone's like saying like, oh, your husband's terrible, basically. And I'm having a cat dog fight right now.
That's fine. Let him duke it out.
And so looking back, I'm like, she genuinely had my best interest at heart and she was genuinely concerned. I still think sometimes that there was something there that I didn't know, but that's just my own thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, New Orleans isn't a giant town.
No.
There's a lot of tourists and a lot of people who come visit, but if you live there,
and when you're marrying the serial dater, like,
yeah, when we talk about swiping left or right, it seems like that was, his bread and butter. Which also, okay, last question about watching it back afterward, because one thing very early on that I was watching and I was like, I cannot believe this, is the bachelor party. Because I was watching it And I was like, this dude's trying to get married? Because he's like straight up just like laying it on real thick with Henry's, lady friends that were there to celebrate with him. And so my question to you is, when you're watching that back, and I think you talked a little bit about it on the show, but like when you're watching that, like after everything is wrapped, like what is going through your mind, or what kind of emotions does that invoke? Because I can imagine myself, I'd be like, oh, well, shit, I wish I just would have seen this like day one. Because then, I would have saved myself, 10 weeks you guys went instead of the 8?
I would have saved myself a marriage. It was very hard to watch in the sense that, come on, Allie. It was very hard to watch in the sense that I didn't hear about it until after we'd pretty much called it quits. I think the whole cast pretty much knew about it except for me. All I knew about the bachelor party was this Irish goodbye, which he had to teach me what that was. And so like there's a conversation, I think, when we're with Woody and Amani, and they're talking about the honeymoon or the bachelor party. And I'm like, oh yeah, Brett did this Irish goodbye. And they're just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, everybody at this point in the room knows something that I don't. And so you don't feel silly in the moment because you have no idea. But looking back after, I'm like, everybody knew but me. Like every single person knew but me. And I respect them for letting me figure out my relationship with Brett and not like dirtying the water before it was too soon. But it was absolutely disgusting. And that right there just shows, drunk or not, that you're not ready for marriage. You're just here. You're just here and you're not taking it seriously. And I feel bad for Kristen. I've apologized to Kristen on behalf of Brett. I don't know why, but I'm like, I feel terrible. Like, you don't treat people that way. And you're on your bachelor party that's being filmed for television, and you're about to get married literally in a week. And that's the behavior you have? Cool.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say, because I agree with you 110%. And when me and my wife were watching it, because we give the kid the iPad. That's her, like, we're going to watch something. So here's your iPad. You get your time. And then we're great parents, by the way. But we were just looking at each other like this guy is, because I think it's Henry who says, like, he says something like, this guy is like literally
terrible. He says
terrible.
He's terrible.
And we're both just like, yeah, I agree. And looking back after everything was said and done, to your point, it feels like everything from like I want to have kids right away, or you just want to spend all this money and travel and do all this stuff, it seemed like it really was just kind of like a cop out for him not being ready to be like, I need to be I'm in a serious, this is about me being in a serious relationship.
Because it didn't start off serious. And I mean, had I known those things or seen those things in the beginning, I'd be like, you're coming at me and this is what you did, but you don't have that as a defense. And so it's just like, I mean, I'm just telling you, I'm just being honest with you. This is what I want to do. These are the things that I want to accomplish. And this is where I'm at in my life. And I was very clear to the experts that these are the things that I want and this is what I want out of life. And I'm sorry that they're not adding up, but I mean, it was clear from watching from day one that I don't think Brett was ready.
Yeah, and
marriage.
I agree with you 100%. And I think the other thing that really frustrated me watching the show is it was on decision day where you said that he had been texting you like, hey, what's up, sweetie? Or, trying to be smooth through text message, where it's like, it almost seemed like he didn't want the commitment, but he wanted the benefit, like seeing if he could kind of, again, I don't know the dude personally, so I don't want to like judge his motives.
Yeah, and it was just and how I took that was, when they come and ask, is there any communication? You can say, yeah, I initiated it. That's how I took those text messages. Like, you don't want to talk to me. You are just texting me. So that way, when we sit down on this day and the experts ask, is there any communication? Who's initiating the communication? Because anybody knows they're going to ask those questions. He could be like, yeah, I text her. I try to talk to her. That's how I took it. That's how I felt at that point.
Yeah. Me and my wife and I, we were like, it's either something like that or he's a lonely dude. Because, someone who's living that's their dating life, where it's like Bumble or Tinder or whatever. I'm so out of touch, I'd probably hop on Grindr, because just not knowing that it wasn't for me. But like it, especially with COVID happening, I think we were both kind of like, I wonder if he's like feeling lonely, and maybe he's trying to see if like he can open the door back up, at least for something that benefits him. Not a relationship, not a, hey, I need to apologize, I should have been this more serious, but like,
company.
Hey, want to come over and drink some wine? Yeah.
Because, that's how our marriage was. Quarantine happened, we shut down, and we lived very much like roommates. We watched movies, we cooked dinner, we drank wine, we hung out, we were like buds. Like, he was my bud, that we didn't really have anything in common. So
just a roommate to cuddle with.
Yeah. And there wasn't even much of that.
Yeah. Because, they showed and that's the thing too, is like, again, I don't know him. But they showed the footage of like from just like the security cameras that are there, or like the wireless cameras.
Yeah.
And like, they show like the little bit of you guys like cuddling and things seeming to be like kind of okay in those moments. So I was just wondering, like, do you think that was just because it was, like you said, like it was COVID and it's like, well, you're the person I got? Or do you think that it was like kind of like what you said in the show, where he was a different guy on camera and then tended to be, a little more sweet and understanding when there wasn't a camera in his face?
He definitely was sweet and understanding, which it seems like, I think how I tried to come off and say, like, trying to say who Brett was. I'm like, I don't like Brett on TV, camera Brett. But Brett is genuinely, I think deep down inside, he's a nice guy. Like, he knew how much I loved going out to eat. And so he made me fancy specialty tacos one night because he knew how much I was missing, like going out and, going to dinner. And so, he does thoughtful things like that. He bought me a wine fridge full of wine for our 1 month. And, there were times where I think he genuinely did maybe like me. But I also think there was a point where he maybe wouldn't let his guard down, or just, I don't know. He would never let that barrier break all the way. And so I do think deep down, Brett is a nice guy. He volunteers at the animal shelter. He can't be a sociopath. You know what I mean? Like, right. I think he is a good dude. I just think he has trouble expressing himself and like showing who he is. And I think sarcasm and being an asshole-ish, whatever, is his defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And, people are like that and people are okay with that, but that's just not what I want. And so it was hard for me to explain, like, Brett's not bad. He's not bad. He does nice things for me. He genuinely, like, every morning would make breakfast and, like, told me to have a good day. And just, he was a morning person and just woke up and was just happy in the morning. And, like, he was never terrible to be around. I think it was more just the cameras, and he wasn't sure how to portray himself, or I don't know, be himself all the time. And so sarcasm is what came out, and that doesn't rub everybody the right way. So, like, I say things about him that I disagree with because this was my experience, but deep down, like, I think Brett is a good dude.
Yeah. And I will say, so, my family watching it, my family is very similar to what I saw from his family, where like if we're not, we make fun of each other because we love each other. And
absolutely.
my defense is, like, when I get uncomfortable, my first thing is I don't get sarcastic, but I make jokes to try to crack the tension. Like, that's just what I feels natural to me. And I didn't get the sense that he was, like you said, I didn't get a sense that he was a like a terrible guy or a monster or anything like that, but I got the sense that he wasn't ready mentally for the decision that he thought he thought he was ready for. And then I also think there are some people. I have a really close friend who's like this. He'll only date or be involved with girls that he feels he is smarter than, because he likes to have that, like, oh, well, I'm the smart man and she's the, and I think you are someone that, and again, very evident in the show, listen, like, I want to travel. I like nice things. I like nice wine. Like, I've got things that I want to do. You're smart, and you didn't have a problem sticking up for yourself. And so I don't know if maybe watching it, that was my thought, is like, oh, well, maybe that's some of why that friction is there, because it's not just somebody being like, okay, Brett, like, sure, let's have 6 babies in 2 years and I'll eat at the IHOP, or, like, whatever, and not to dog IHOP. I
love IHOP.
Love IHOP. It's so
pancakes.
Good. They're not a sponsor of the show, but eat their Cinestack pancakes. They're so good. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I felt like you were, I don't even want to say too headstrong, because I don't think that's like a fair assessment, but I think you might have been too headstrong and knew what you wanted to the point where that didn't compute with him, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm sure, and I say to my friends all the time, like, I just turned 31 in December, and, I've been living by myself since 2017, and I need to start doing the math so I know how many years that is. But I have had 2 of my best friends live with me, come do travel assignments. One stayed for 5 months. The other one just left. She actually came kind of right when we separated, Brett and I, and has lived in my house until just last month, Thanksgiving. Right before Thanksgiving, my birthday, really. She left right after my birthday, early December. And so, like, I am like, don't load the dishwasher that way. And so there are things about me that I'm like, yeah, I'm probably getting too set in my ways a little bit. But, I'm also like, if you really are enjoying someone and you respect them and there's like love and compassion, like, all those things just kind of mold when you are in a relationship. And so I think mine and Brett's relationship was so roommate-like that it was hard not to be like, don't load the dishwasher that way. Please don't leave dishes in the sink. Like, this is a neutral ground. Like, and so I don't know. I just feel like it was a hard assessment. I don't know where I'm going with this, and I can ramble all day long, but
no, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
I feel like I'm getting too set in my ways. Like, I could be too headstrong. That's where I was going with this. I could be too headstrong, but I'm also not very opinionated about things. Like, I know what I want and what I believe in, but I also don't push those on people.
Right.
And so I think that he probably would have appreciated someone a little more submissive.
Yeah. And I definitely got that vibe. And the other thing that I wanted to ask, and I wanted to see how let me explain my thought process first, and then you can respond, because we touched on this a little bit. So when everyone was first matched up, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, no, this is a mistake. Olivia should be matched with Henry and Christina should be matched with Brett. That, like, Christina wants a guy who's going to be aggressive and this and that, and Henry needed somebody that just understood that, like, Henry was Henry and not, like, and that was our initial. We're both just like, I don't know, like we love the experts, but we were like, maybe they called this one a little bit wrong, and it seems like since everything has wrapped up and there have been photos of you and Henry online and things like that, it seems like the internet and fans of the show tend to think the same way that my wife and I did. So I guess my first question is, do you think things would have worked out differently had you been paired with Henry as opposed to being paired with Brett? I know it's a hard question. I know it's not fair because it's like, who can say, but I just wonder what your thoughts are.
I think Henry and I at this point have formed a friendship. I think Henry and I are much more alike than me and Brett were. Do I think that being married to Henry, we would have been the successful couple? Who knows? Nobody will ever know. But I do think I would have gotten a really worst case scenario. I would have gotten a really great friend out of it because Henry is not someone who's confrontational. And I think if we were to have been matched and walked away at the end of the day and not stay married, like it would have been like a mutual respect for one another. And that's just based on how I see our friendship. Henry's a good dude. He is just a genuinely nice guy. And, I wish him the best. And we do hang out here and there. And I try to keep in touch with him and texting because he is a nice guy. But I don't know what the outcome would have been had we been matched. Would we be sitting here doing this together? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. Watching the show, there's sometimes when you watch it where you're like, it's hard not to feel like, oh, well, this person just got a bad shake of the stick. You know what I mean? I think someone like Mindy in season 10 or
Amber,
or why am I forgetting her name? She was the one who was married to Brandon.
Taylor.
Taylor, yes. I think sometimes you just kind of get like, and the experts are doing the best they can as far as just like, hey, we've asked all these. I think that's another thing too, are the people who are answering the questions, like what you said earlier, are they being honest in that moment? Are they presenting themselves as honestly as possible? But, I watching this past season, my wife and I were both like, oh, well, Olivia definitely got a bad shake of the stick, and so did Henry. And we just kept being like, no, they should switch. It doesn't like call an audible halfway. Let's switch it up. Do something that's never been done before. Just switch halfway through. And I think it's really cool that you guys are friends and have been able to like maintain that friendship. And I think the other thing that's really cool is it seems like Henry's friends enjoy you as well, which was something that was, when you would see them on the show kind of talking about Christina, it did not seem like they were big fans. So it's cool that like you kind of meld
Kristen
in there.
And Trishelle are sweet. I just feel like there's two things that I want to say about people on cameras. Trishelle and Kristen are sweet. They are sweet. They are kind. They were very welcoming of me. And the other thing was the other people that got a bad go was from like social media was Brett's siblings. Brett's siblings are great. They were welcoming to me. They were sweet to me. They just have that sense of humor that I just don't think everybody understands. But they were so kind and so sweet. And I just felt when I was reading things like how terrible people were being about them. But they are very kind people.
Yeah, I think it doesn't translate for everyone. Like if you're not someone who's cut from that cloth, like I said, we live in Nashville, but I'm from Michigan originally. So whenever my wife is from Nashville originally. So whenever we like FaceTime, like my brother and my brother-in-law, they're all automatically like, "Hi, Kara, how's it going? You eat any muskrat today?" Like they just, give her a hard time.
Yeah.
And she gives it right back to him. But if you're not from that kind of people, I can see how that
wouldn't
wouldn't
understand.
Yeah, it's like it's.
And I think it was sorry to interrupt. I think it was the same thing with Henry's dad. Like Henry's dad, I found was hilarious, but he reminded me of like my uncles, and so I'm like, I get the humor, and I just think there's like a sense of New Orleans and people who aren't from here, born and raised here, which I'm not born and raised. My dad is, but I think there's just a thing about families and how people are, and it's just who they are. And, I don't think that it translates across the country the way that people here understand.
And I think it speaks to a thickness of people's skin. New Orleans is obviously, I mean, Katrina aside, I mean, New Orleans has faced its share of issues, and Michigan is very similar where, we were thriving with the automotive industry, and then everybody moved out of the country and things like that. And areas that once prospered were no longer that way. So you have to have you have to be resilient and have a thicker kind of skin. And I think that lends itself to like being able to rib each other, and take it. So, I did want to ask you this. Let's say they were doing Married at First Sight, second chances. They came to you and said, Olivia, listen, we think you got a bad shake of the stick. Would you want to come back on for Married at First Sight, second chances? And they're going to match you up again. You're going to go through the whole thing again. Would you do it, do you think? Or do you think it was kind of like okay, I did it. I tried it. It's in the rear view now. Like, what do you, I know it's a weird question because it's, it's, who knows if it's anything that would ever be likely to happen, but I'm interested to see like if it meant that you got, let's say this time, like you felt like you were going to get that person, would it be something that you were willing to do again?
If I could do, if Lifetime came and said, hey, we're doing this show, we're going to put these people together, and I didn't have to get married right away, I would do it again. And I only say get married again because I took my chance on, a modern day arranged marriage and it didn't work. And I just don't know that a second time would actually be beneficial to me. But if they said, hey, we think we have this person, we want to like see where y'all could go, but y'all can just date and you can kind of choose what you want to do. Sure. 100% I would do it. I just don't know that I want the, there's a lot that comes into being married and the process after when the marriage doesn't work that I don't want to do that again. And I don't want to, I kind of want to save that for, the right person. But I would definitely do something where I could, choose what I wanted or date or whatever. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not. It didn't seem like it was necessarily like the cameras and hey, what's up, man? It didn't seem like it was like the cameras or anything. More so, just the like. Is that no? Eleanor's the dog.
Eleanor's the dog. That's Ricky. That's the bully cat. She's super clumsy, so I'm not surprised that something came flying over. But there's
she's
also
clumsy
a candle burning. So.
She's clumsy with confidence. She hopped. She hopped right up there.
She jumped from a chair to the mantle. She's not a good ground to the Ricky. Get down. Anyways, I live with a zoo.
Already.
Why need a husband when you can have two cats and a dog? Who wouldn't want it, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like necessarily the issue so much was like you, and I think that takes a special kind of person too to be like, hey, I'm vulnerable enough and like open and secure enough with myself that I don't mind sharing myself with, the nation. But more of the fear comes down to like, do I have to, because I know like, for example, when Mindy was on, she was on right before the start of your season. So they had been wrapped for a while and she was still trying to get her divorce finalized. So I know it's not like a, oh, okay, decision day, here's the papers, and like now you guys are all done. It drags out for quite some time,
I'm still legally married.
How do you feel about that?
I thought I would start the new year not, but with the holidays and stuff, it is in process. And every state has different rules where you have to be separated for so long, and then it's just like I want to be married and I want to be someone's significant other and spouse and wife and have all those titles. But I just don't think doing it this way. I would recommend it to anyone. Like I would say, like if my friend came to me and said, hey, they're casting in this city and I think I want to do it, I would say, okay. Because when you watch from someone who is a fan of the show, when you see the success that happens with people that you grew to love and became friends with, it's like, this is everything that I wanted and hoped for. And so just like Woody and Imani, seeing them, and I use them as an example because me and Imani became friends during the process before we were even matched. And so just like seeing the growth that they have and how willing those two were to make it work and really put themselves first and forget about production and the cameras and all of this. We are going to be who we are and we're going to figure it out. That just tells you that like it can work if you have the right person. And so I think there are people who, I don't know where it comes down. If it's just people not being honest, I don't know where the break in the system is. But of course, there's not going to be 100% success rate every year. You're getting 10 strangers together and say, make it work. But I would recommend it to people. I think if you are in it for the right reasons and you do the exercises and you really put your marriage first, you can make it work. And it's evident. There's so many successful couples.
Yeah, and people that are still together, from like the very first couple of seasons that are still, and they've had babies and all sorts of stuff. So, I did want to ask this, and I know we've been going for a little bit here, so we'll wrap up in just a minute. But I did want to ask, you had mentioned Woody and Amani, and that you became friends with Amani during the process. Is there anyone, from your season? I know Bennett got his basic smartphone that could do the emojis and stuff like that. Do you guys still all keep in touch, or is it like some of you keep in touch with others, or is there still anybody that you talk to pretty frequently?
From my standpoint, I would say the people I talk to the most would be the Randalls, the Williams, and Henry. And then Bennett and Amelia, of course, moved away right after, so that kind of went away. But Bennett comes to town more than Amelia does, but they were both here. And so Henry and I went and had a picnic with Bennett and Amelia. And so it was nice. And I've texted Amelia a little bit since like the COVID vaccines and stuff had come out. But I would say mostly I stay in touch with, I call us the six that are basically here, which are the Randalls, the Williams, and me and Henry.
Yeah.
And so we try to I call them family dinners. He's gangster.
Fuck your mantle.
And so we try to go to dinner and keep in touch with one another. But of course, their lives are going. Like Karen, Miles, Woody, and Amani, they all, I guess, are doing couples cam and just really figuring things out. And so they're busy. And then we all just live our own lives, but we all do try to stay in touch with each other and get together.
Yeah, and that's cool because obviously I wouldn't expect you guys to be like, hey, you ready for our weekly hang? You know what I mean? But
monthly. We try to do maybe monthly.
Yeah, but I
go to dinner.
Well, and maybe this season, this analogy is probably the closest because of COVID and everything. But I've always kind of thought about it as it seems almost like the same kind of relationship you would have when you're like a couple friends who go to war together. You know what I mean? Because you've gone through this shared experience that nobody who hasn't gone through it can really understand fully. And then you go into it being I'm a nurse practitioner, or, in Miles' case, hey, I work in the school and I teach, basketball and stuff like that. You go from being this normal person to then you're on a national, and now with Netflix picking up the first however many seasons, it's maybe
I have a lot of fans from Ireland. People from Ireland watch the show. I've had a couple people reach out to me from Ireland.
That's awesome.
I'm like, what?
They're send me some whiskey. Send me the good stuff.
I get some Irish coffee.
Right. But it's I feel like it's one of those things where unless, because then you come out of it and like you said, you're getting recognized at work or on your scooter or something like that. And it's and if you haven't gone through that, I think it'd be very hard for someone, like me to just be like, oh yeah, I can imagine exactly what that would be like. You know what I mean? So it's gotta be a pretty strong bond, even if, it isn't necessarily someone that you would have hung out with out in your normal life before the show. You know what I mean? So I think
I think COVID helped us a lot, and I think COVID probably broke some of us too. But I think that being in quarantine probably helped marriages. When production was gone, you really got to see who you were married to. And unfortunately, mine got broken. But the people who are still together, kudos to them. It's hard work. I'm sure marriage on a regular standpoint, when the person is hard work. But, we are 10 people who went into this in a normal sense of like planning our year of 2020. We started out getting married, and then bam, like we got back from our honeymoon. We basically had a week together, and then we were shut down. And so I think it brought us closer together because we would go and see each other. We would do like family dinners. We all lived in the same building. So we're like, okay, we're all breathing the same air. Everything is okay. We're in an enclosed building. So we would do dinners together. And I think that really helped us grow to be closer together as friends. And I think we just have a unique bond. And I think we are all just a good group of people. I honestly think that season 11 is the best yet.
There were, like, I agree with you. Like, because I'll say this about Woody. When they first did the introduction of Woody in like the first like couple episodes, I was like, oh, this guy isn't here to be married. And then I was yeah, but I kind of felt like watching his friends, you know what I mean? Where his friends are like, you're not the kind of guy. I was like, nah, this isn't the guy who, wants. And then you see him with Imani, and immediately you're like, oh yeah, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or like, like seeing Miles with Karen and both of them helping each other kind of grow out of these like spaces of uncomfort to be better for each other and stuff like that. And I mean, I will say this, like, even though things didn't work out for you and Brett, and I would say the same thing for Henry, but even though things didn't work out, it felt like by the end of the show, it seemed like you were empowered on like a level that you hadn't been throughout the show, or maybe haven't been before. But like when you're on decision day, when you're like, no, I'm done. Like it was like, oh shit, like Olivia's like a super strong human being. So do you think like, and I think the same thing with Henry, like with Henry, when the show starts and throughout, he's so like, he doesn't want to offend anybody. And he's, he cares so much about other people's feelings. And then by the end, he's like, no, I'm good. Right. So like, do you think being on the show for you personally, I mean, do you think it showed you a strength that like maybe you didn't know that you had before?
I think so, a little bit. There was a lot of growth, and like people ask like, what's your biggest growth? What's your biggest take home point? There is so much that I can't even like list them. I went into this, me. I am just me. I feel like I live a boring life. I like to do things, but I work hard, and I like to reward myself at the end of the day. And I went into this like, I'm just boring. They're never going to pick me. Never. And then, you keep going on and you're like, oh, shoot, like I really think I'm about to get matched with somebody. And so I think my biggest take home point was like, yes, I want to check the box of being married. But do I want to check the box of living a life that I'm not completely happy in? And so I think you learn a lot about what you're willing to put up with, and what you always have the things. I always say, like, say your wife does something that drives you nuts, and you've had the conversation a couple times and it continues to happen. Simple as like leaving the toilet seat up, for an example. You learn to let the little things go, but then when the big things are bothersome, you just know what you want to stand for and what you don't want to put up with. And I would give my life being alone the rest of my life if I couldn't have someone who was genuinely there for me and kind and compassionate and just compatible with me. So the box doesn't always have to be checked if it's not right. And I think I grew strength in really realizing like what I want out of life. You always have this sense of like, when you're filling out the application, these are the things that I want. This is what I think I need. This is where I've been. This is what I'm looking for. And then you get there and it's kind of like a slap in the face. Like, okay, maybe Olivia, this isn't what you need. And this isn't who you need to be with. And maybe this look isn't what you want. But I think just standing for what you believe and really just not settling, I guess, is the biggest thing. Like, just don't settle. Like, you only have one life to live, and if you settle on things that don't make you happy, then what are you getting in the end? Yeah, I could say, oh, I'm somebody's wife, I'm married, but am I genuinely happy? And are these the things that I want to wake up with every morning? And are these the problems that I want to have every day of the week? No. And so I think it made me grow stronger and just really standing firm for myself and helping me have that backbone. But I think it was a good experience. It's very hard. It's very difficult. And I'm rambling. So just.
No, and you're not rambling at all. I think what you're speaking to is knowing your worth. You know what I mean? And what I kind of felt watching your journey progress through the show is that as you went through, you were again just kind of like, oh, like, do I deserve better than what I have right now? Am I worth more than this? And I think by the end, you were, which a lot of people can't do, but you were very like able to say, hey, definitively, I know that I'm worth more than this, and I'm you know, I deserve more than this, I'm worth more than this, and I'm not doing it. So I think that's, you know, and who knows, maybe there's people in relationships that feel that same way, that have been in that relationship for like 7, 8, 9, 10 years or whatever, and watching you be like, no, I deserve better than this. Maybe that was the catalyst that they need to be like, no, I'm good. Time to, you know, move on to something, you know, a greener pasture, you know?
Yeah, you don't realize the perspective of other people, and you don't really realize like what you're going through, someone else may be going through aside from marrying a stranger. But I've had many women reach out to me and just be like, thank you. Like, thank you for being strong and standing up for yourself and just breaking the barriers and just moving on and realizing that we as women don't have to be in a situation. And, you know, I didn't even think twice about it. And I'm like, gee, I only hope that I can help other women like uplift each other and just stand for what you believe in, stand for what you want. We got one life, live it to the fullest, and, you know, just try to be the best version of yourself. And if you're not in a happy place and you're not in a happy marriage, the grass might be greener on the other side. So take that chance. And so I was really surprised by the outreach that I got from just standing up for what I wanted and how I felt.
That's awesome. And it's got to feel, you know, I know with this podcast, people have reached out and been like, hey, like I'm in, like, I really like what you're doing and I've wanted to start one, but I have no idea. Like, can you help, like, you know, point me in the right direction? And even something as simple as just doing something like this. I'm like, oh, like if no one ever listens to it, you know what I mean? Like, I've inspired other people to get online and try something that they're passionate about. So I can't imagine the feeling when it's like, yeah, I've been with this dude for 15 years and you made me realize like I'm not living my best life. You know what I mean?
Like, wait. Right. Figure it out. Try counseling first. Well, I've only known my husband about a week, so. Right.
Well, you know, I did, to wrap things up, because what I did is I put out some feelers online, and I did put it on like the Married at First Sight subreddit as well, where I reached out and I asked some people, or I just, you know, asked, hey, you know, I'm interviewing Olivia, and if you have any questions or, you know, anything that you would like to ask, you know, let us know. And I did get some messages back, but they were all about production and editing and stuff that like, that's not important. So what I wanted to do is, this is our very first show of 2021, right? 2020. Yes. And 2020 sucked hard for the most part. So around the same time, I put out just, you know, a question online, and I was asking people, you know, 2020 is over. We're into 2021. And even though 2020 was so rough, you know, we like to be a show that focuses on the positive and learning from experiences and how do you carry that forward. So I asked people like, hey, what were you thankful for in 2020 that you're going to carry into 2021? So Kayla M actually is a nurse as well. And she said that she is extremely thankful for a COVID vaccine, because I know that's taken a lot of stress off of her. Leah B is thankful for company. She says it's not so much about the journey or reaching your destination as much as the company that you have along the way. And then another one that I really liked was Miss Natasha, who said that it was her kids. Her kids drive her nuts, but they've kept her in check the past few months, and she doesn't know what she would do without them. Finally, my mom left a message. She said she's thankful for her wonderful kids and grandkids, and she's very happy about her son's podcast. I'm not going to play the message, but she left a voicemail. It was very funny. But I wanted to ask you, 2020, when we talk about it being a crazy year just for the average person, I mean, you're married, you're on TV, there's COVID, you are one of the people out there showing your vaccination experience. It's been a crazy year. What are you thankful for from 2020, and what will you carry with you into 2021?
I think 2020 is going to be a year for me that I won't say was bad or good. It will be one that I put in the books forever, and I will always remember. Like, I will always look back at 2020. I am very thankful for my health. I have been blessed enough not to have COVID, and have remained very healthy to be able to take care of people during this year. I will be thankful for the knowledge that I learned about myself and the growth that I actually had this year. And, I'm really enjoying my time, just spending time at home and being at home, and, spending more time with my family and touching base with the people that mean the most to me. I've said a couple times, like, you only live once. And I have a lot of people asking me about what trip am I going to go on next. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to chill out and settle out and be at home. I got a puppy, so I'm going to raise her and, just enjoy the world. Like, enjoy walking outside and breathing fresh air and being healthy and happy. And, I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for a lot of things. I'm thankful for my family, my friends, my health, love and support that I've gotten from everybody. I try to reach out to everyone that has messaged me on social media. And just let them know that your nice words really go a long way for me, So I'm thankful for everybody. I really am. I'm thankful to be here. 2020 wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't be here.
Well, this is, trust me, this is no big accomplishment, but I'm very grateful.
I love podcasts. I'm excited.
Well, we love having you, and anytime you would ever like to come back, I'll bump someone. I'll be like, hey, I know we're supposed to record this day, but Olivia wants to come back, so you're coming.
Listen, any shows you want me to watch, catch up on, anything you want to talk about, I will get in the know, and we can just chat about it.
Let's do it.
I love podcasts. I'm dead serious.
Well, I'm serious. I would love to have you on whenever you want. I'll start. Maybe you, me, and my wife can do like a mid-season breakdown of season 12 coming up or something. Do a little commentary.
Yeah, so because I can just be a regular viewer. I don't have to be. Like, I have my own. You'll have
the inside perspective, though. You know what I mean? So that's you will be our panel expert. We'll be like a really low budget CNN. We'll just throw to you in the field. So
with my zoo in the background, it'll be great. We'll make a great podcast. No, I'm super excited to do this.
Well, super, super happy to have you again. I really appreciate you taking the time. For those of you if you're listening at home, you never watched Married at First Sight, you're crazy. Season 12 is going to start on the 13th of January. So this will come out on Wednesday. It'll be a week after this episode comes out. Please check it out. Please follow Olivia on the socials. It's very just for your soul, man. If you want to, there's so much division and hateful stuff out there right now, where if you just want to feel good and follow somebody who puts positive energy out into the world, follow Olivia. So we'll link up her Instagram in the show notes. Would you mind sticking around for a minute after we wrap up?
Absolutely. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, guys. That is episode 43. Big thank you to Miss Olivia Cornu, and we will see you guys next week for episode 44.